Vamos embora. Obrigado.
In this section, we're talking about changing the appearance of our site by creating a custom theme. We will look at defining a theme, managing asset libraries, organizing CSS, using JavaScript, and using Twig templates. In this video, we will look at defining a custom theme. We will discuss the info YAML file, Drupal 8's two base themes, and defining regions in a theme. Let's start off the process by creating a folder named empty inside of the theme's custom directory. Next, we will create the empty.info.yml file. The only required pieces are the name, type, description, and what version of core to use. With this one file in place, our theme will show up as an option in the Appearances Administration section. We will install our theme and set it as the default theme. Then we will have a look at our site as an anonymous visitor. It should not be a surprise that things look rather plain. If we view our page source, we will notice that we are inheriting CSS from the stable. We also see that the markup is quite sparse. Why did we inherit stable as a base theme then? The answer can be found in the documentation. If a theme does not declare itself a base theme and does not specify a base theme, then stable becomes the base theme by default. Now we will sign in and take a look at the regions that are available to us in our theme. We see left sidebar, right sidebar, content, header, primary menu, secondary menu, footer, highlighted, help, and breadcrumb. The stable theme does not declare any regions. We inherited these regions from its page.html.twig. You can learn more about this template in the API documentation. We are going to return to our info YAML and specify that we want classy as our base theme by inserting the line base theme classy. Once we do this, we will need to clear cache so that Drupal rebuilds the theme registry. Let's visit the site as an anonymous visitor again. The page now has a tiny bit of styling. When we view the page source, we see that we still get some CSS from stable. We also get CSS from classy. The markup is also not as sparse as it was before. The classy theme also regions. We inherit all of our regions from its page.html.twig template. We will declare our own regions by updating our info.yml file. It's important to note that once we declare any regions, we must specify all of our regions. We no longer inherit any regions from a base theme or from the page.html.twig template. These regions will appear in the block layout screen in the order we specify them. Defining our own regions and placing blocks in those regions still won't have much effect on how the site appears. In order to do that, we'll need to add CSS to our theme. Before we add CSS or JavaScript to our theme, we need to understand how we use asset libraries to control what CSS and JavaScript get loaded on each page. So in the next video, we will look at managing asset libraries. In the last video, we completed some minimal steps to define a custom theme. In this video, we will learn how our theme uses libraries to manage assets. We will look at defining a library and attaching a library. We had a video by commenting that we needed to add CSS to our theme to change its appearance. We might also want to add JavaScript to our theme behavior. In either case, we will need to use libraries to manage when our CSS and JavaScript is loaded. Drupal 8 follows the philosophy that it will not load any CSS or JavaScript unless it is explicitly told to do so. There are different ways we can tell Drupal which CSS and JavaScript to load. One method for doing so is through the use of asset libraries in our theme. In addition to CSS and JavaScript, libraries can contain JavaScript settings. Let's get the assets we want loaded on every page of our theme. we will create the md8d.libraries.yml file. Next, we will create a global styling for our theme. With these pieces in place, we return to our info.yml file to indicate we want this library loaded on every page. We will also create a library that is supposed to be loaded only when we are on the front page of our site, so that it has a special look compared to the other pages. Since we don't want this library loaded on every page, we are not going to use our info.yml file. Instead, we will use a preprocess function, which we place in our md8d.theme file. We now have pieces in place to start styling our custom theme. However, all of our CSS files are empty. You will be writing the actual CSFD.
Daqui bocado para trás, isso não é que é importante. O gajo basicamente cria fecheiro chamado o nome do tema. Depois daqui a salto um bocado. Isto aqui é importante. Isto é tipo o fecheiro das libraries, onde o gajo define CSS e JavaScript associados, que é o fecheiro. Depois criou o fecheiro team. E aquilo neste fecheiro team, ele cria esta função para processo que tem o nome do tema, para processo, que é o nome da função page, que tipo a homepage. Há muitas funções que fazem isto, este processo, ou seja, o gajo pega nas variables que se chamam simple variables, aqui dentro, o drupal, e depois começa a fazer, e depois trabalha com elas, basicamente. Neste caso está a criar um markup chamado text, que também já está à espera, que é tipo estilos e JavaScript que ele pode estar à espera, e mete ali dentro.
Page, we are not going to use our info.yml file. Instead, we will use a preprocess function, which we place in our md8. In the last video, we looked at using asset libraries to control when CSS and JavaScript are loaded. In this video, we will discuss using Twig templates. We will look at Twig syntax, debugging Twig, overriding template files, and using preprocess functions. Before we get into the details of this lesson, I want to admit up front that I'm creating an admittedly silly example for the purpose of learning. Fortunately, this silly example is limited to our custom theme and won't have an adverse effect on the site's functionality. We are going to have our custom theme define a variable that will be displayed on book pages, apply styling to the book page, and apply a JavaScript effect on the book page. The way we will attach our special library for this situation is to use a custom Twig template called node-book-full.html.twig. This template overrides the node.html.twig template that is normally used when viewing nodes. Let's look at what we've got inside that template. The first thing we see is Twig's comment syntax. We see its execution syntax. Finally, we see its print syntax. You might wonder how I came up with that template name. The answer is that I got the suggestion directly from Twig when I turned on Twig debugging. I turned on Twig debugging by copying the default services.yml file into services.yml in my site's default directory. Then I turned on Twig debugging. Once I cleared cache, I was able to view my page source on a book page and have a look at all the information Twig provides me. The last thing I will cover in this video is the preprocess function I have added to my theme. It is named according to the convention that one replaces the dashes in template file names with underscores in the preprocess function. We know that this preprocess function will be called prior to using our custom template. The function is empty now, but you will find out what you are supposed to do with it in your student exercise in our next video. In the last video, we added the final scaffolding to our custom theme. In this video, we will discuss your student assignment. Congratulations on making it through the course. You have invested a great deal of time in yourself, and I salute you. And look at you, continuing right on into the appendix. Rock on, my amazing student. The appendix is different than the rest of the other sections. We won't have the in the last video in this section, in this video, in the next video, or in the next section bits. We won't be teaching things per se. We won't even have any student exercises. What is the point of this section then? The appendix serves as a reference manual and a starting point for finding further resources to take your skill and understanding to the next level. The order of the videos roughly follows the order in which they were mentioned in the course. However, you may feel free to jump around within the appendix in any order you choose, skipping whatever doesn't interest you and diving into whatever does interest you. There are even some bonus topics for you to explore. In order to make sure that Drupal installs and runs correctly, you need to make sure that you meet certain requirements. Make sure to read the handbook on the documentation on drupal.org. It's definitely worth your time to understand this up front before you get started. Setting up a local development environment entails creating the web server and the database server. Additionally, you will need a PHP interpreter. You have various options to do this depending on your operating system. If you are running a distribution of Linux, it's possible to set everything up from scratch. There is a handbook on drupal.org that explains the installation process. If you are new to this, then you probably don't want to jump right into a composer workflow. Here's a quick run through of the installation process. Visit Drupal's project page to find out what the current recommended release of Drupal is. There are two different choices for installing Drupal manually. You may choose a tarball or a zip file. The releases page provides FTP addresses for both. If you wish to use a tool like wget to download them. Alternatively, you can just download directly to your computer by clicking one of the buttons. You will place the extracted contents of the file into whatever location your local staff expects to find it. Use a tool of your choosing to create a new database. Since this is a local development environment, you may choose to run your site with the root user. However, you may also choose to create a new user that has the necessary privileges to the database. Copy the default. There are a number of things that we touched on only briefly during the course and that are important for you to dig into deeper. Early in the course, we mentioned entities. Towards the end of the course, we came back to entities and created a custom entity. In both cases, we were talking about content entities. Drupal also has configuration entities. Entities are used throughout Drupal 8, and it's important to get a strong grasp of how they work. You can learn more about entities in the online documentation. It is also helpful to look at the API documentation. When working with entities, we also make use of annotations in the annotation system. Find out more about annotations in the API documentation. You can also look at examples of things in core that define their annotation types by searching for the @annotation string. Plugins make heavy use of annotations, and the plugin pattern is widely used throughout Drupal 8. It's worthwhile to have a look through all of the plugin API documentation, where you will also learn more about annotations. And again, it's also helpful to look at the API documentation. Finally, you can look at examples in core. We made use of plugin contexts and context-aware plugins in our image gallery block and tour link block. You can look at the API documentation to learn more about this. You can learn more about the two contexts Drupal core provides by looking at the node and user modules. In some of the blocks we created, we made use of the cache API and cache tags. We need to use the cache API to let Drupal know when to invalidate cache for items. Read more about this in the online documentation. Very often when we want Drupal to display something, we will make use of render arrays. The render API documentation contains a page that gives some explanation on render arrays. There is also a section on render arrays in the API documentation. During the course, we took a look at a few contributed modules. As you build sites, you will almost always include contributed modules. There is a handbook on drupal.org that provides information on extending Drupal with contributed modules. Make sure to pay attention to the section that explains where to place things. Here are a few suggestions of where you can get started exploring contributed modules. The paragraphs module has gained a lot of popularity for building sites. The rules module is aimed at providing a strong framework for executing actions based on events and conditions. As of this time, it still is not fully functional in Drupal 8. I'm sure the maintainers would love to have more people on board, helping them to bring the module to a full, stable release. As you work more with building Drupal 8 sites and using configuration management to port UI changes between environments, you may find that things become somewhat problematic. Config Split is one of the modules aimed towards enhancing Drupal 8's configuration management. When you are building multilingual sites that translate the interface, you will be utilizing files that translate strings. There's a dedicated site where Drupal maintains these files for both core and contributed modules. There's also a section in the Getting Involved guide that explains how you can help with translations. We touched only briefly on creating a custom theme in the course. Here are a few more theme concepts you will want to explore further. Drupal 8 takes a mobile-first approach. Look at what happens at admin/content as you size your browser down smaller, and then view the page source for that page. Take note of the meta tags for mobile-optimized, handheld-friendly, and viewport. Also notice class names on some of the elements like priority-low. Set the default theme to Bartik, and then sign out of the site and look at what the Bartik theme does as you resize the browser. View the page source for that and see that it also uses meta tags to indicate that the page is mobile friendly. Take a look inside the core Bartik and 7 themes to see how their CSS uses media queries. When we created our libraries for our theme, we made use of the component and theme keys. When you look at the CSS folder in the 7 theme, you will see folders for base, components, layout, and theme. The keys in directory structure are based on Drupal 8's CSS guidelines. These guidelines were inspired by the scalable and modular architecture for CSS philosophy. If you want to add JavaScript behavior to your themes or modules, it's important that you utilize a certain pattern. The JavaScript API handbook lays out the pattern. There is a theming guide on Drupal.org to help you learn more about building a custom theme. Make sure you understand how to add CSS and JavaScript to the theme and how to declare dependencies. You can find out more about the base, layout, component, state, and theme keys we can use in our libraries to determine the order in which our CSS appears by reading a section of the page on creating custom modules. You can look at the core 7 theme to see all of these pieces being put to use. Just as there are contributed modules, there are also contributed themes, including base themes. You build your sub-theme off the base theme so that you can inherit functionality from the base theme. There are a number of contributed base themes that are designed to make it easier for you to create a mobile-friendly custom theme. You might even want to have a look at some of the contributed full themes for inspiration on the types of things you can do. If you are coming to Drupal 8 from a previous version of Drupal, you will encounter a lot of new concepts. If you are coming to Drupal from a totally non-Drupal background, you will also want to understand certain concepts. Drupal 8 is still written in PHP. It is now almost entirely object-oriented. There is a page in the Creating Custom Modules guide that has links to many external resources that address OOP concepts. PHP now also includes namespaces to simplify the process of avoiding naming collisions. The way that Drupal 8 organizes its namespaces and its code is influenced by the PHP standards recommendations. With the goal of not constantly reinventing the wheel and moving away from Drupalisms, Drupal 8 has included many third-party libraries. One major change was to include components from the Symfony framework. 2 important concepts to understand are the service container and dependency injection. Best practice in web development dictates using a version control system. This course utilizes the Git version control system to distribute the code. In general, you will need to know only a couple of simple commands to be able to use this repository: git clone and git checkout. You will need to install a Git client, and there are a number of options. While it's not strictly required, Drupal is moving towards a composer-based management approach. Composer is a dependency manager. It keeps track of what libraries an application needs in order to be able to run. You don't have to learn everything about Composer in order to be able to start using it, and it's fairly easy to install it. Many experienced Drupal developers prefer to take line tools to simplify their job. Drush is the first command line tool written for Drupal. It is actively developed on GitHub and provides you with documentation to learn more about how to use it. Drupal console is a newer command line tool that leverages Symfony's console component. There are resources available to learn more about Drupal console, including the project on GitHub. PHP Unit is a testing framework that has been incorporated with Drupal 8. It is definitely worthwhile to have a look through the documentation that PHP Unit provides so that you can understand how Drupal integrates it. You can get more details by looking at the specific test-based classes that Drupal has defined to extend PHP Unit's test case class. When you need to debug code, you will quickly grow tired of resorting to adding print, echo, and bare dump statements to the code. Xdebug is an extension for PHP to assist with debugging and development. PHP Storm is an integrated development environment that has become popular within the Drupal community. It is capable of integrating with Xdebug to enable you to debug your code interactively. You can also run PHP unit tests from within PHP Storm. If you would prefer an entirely free and open source solution to writing and debugging code, you may look at Vim and VDebug. So without further ado, I will once again offer my sincere appreciation for having
E já está.